Good evening, everyone. This is Cricket Lot for Monday, February 12th, 2024. We are at the Healthy Lifestyle Raw Food Potluck. And tonight our speaker is Kellie Soper. She has a, I don't know if you call it, Master Herbalist Certificate from the Trinity School of Natural Health. And she trained in folk tradition of reflexology from her grandfather. So it's a little bit different than some other reflexology that people do perform. But she is going to speak to us tonight about lots of great things, I'm sure. So, Kellie, come on down.
Yay! Thank you. Hi. Thank you for letting me come. So yes, my name is Kellie, Kellie Soper, and I've been interested in natural health for as long as I can remember. My grandpa used to teach me, even just when I was really young, about better ways to eat food or cleaner food sources. He was a farmer in Bath, and he ended up going into the military in World War II, and ended up stationed in California, and that's where he learned reflexology, and he also learned a lot about nutrition and better farming practices, more sustainable farming practices. Then he came back to Bath, and it really wasn't accepted here in this area. You know, Bath was a small farming community, but he really worked really hard on his own farm to bring more sustainable practices there, and to less processing of the food, less, like the regular normal agriculture, how it is, it's stripping the land. He was rotating crops in a different way than we see traditional farming does now. So, but in that, he learned a lot about nutrition, and he shared that with me a lot. And I grew to love, I grew to love knowing where our food comes from, how to get really nutrient dense food, because we can get it off the ground from farmers now, and there's just not as much nutrition in the soil anymore, and we're just not getting nutrient dense food. And so that started my journey. And then in 2016, I just really wanted to be able to dive into it as a practice where I could help people and share it with people. And I always have loved things that grow, and I love being outside where things grow. So I chose to go into herbalism and learn herbal medicine. I kind of got a taste of it at MSU. Excuse me, they had a free class where you would go down to the organic farm, and they taught some herbalism there. We walked through their live edible forest that they have there, and they taught me about plantain, which happens to be one of the handouts that I have given tonight. That was what I would say my first herb was, plantain. And we learned a lot about what you can do with plantain. And then from there, I just decided to, expand. Like, that made sense to me. And so then I started working with herbs, but then I found out I could actually go to school for it. So that's when yeah. So, but you kind of as an herbalist, you kind of fall in love with your first herb. And so plantain is, special to me because it was my first herb.
What do you have to do? How much do you have to learn about
this? To be an herbalist, or any one of you can be an herbalist, I would say, but a medicinal herbalist is, there's various levels. There'd be like a clinical herbalist or an apothecary type herbalist who would blend teas or sell dried herbs or whatever. But it's the school gives you the ability to do herbalism as a medical, it's not medical, but a clinical herbalist, where you can actually take an herb and apply it to an issue if necessary. Nope, we don't practice medicine. No. I can know, and yeah, so natural health is a little different than allopathic health. Right. And really with natural health, we aren't looking to find ways to take care of symptoms. Allopathy really has a focus on symptom management. And natural health, we look at the person and we see where maybe imbalances are and how can we fill in those imbalances. And so there's other techniques that I would use to find out if you would need to increase a certain food in your diet. Like, maybe there's something in apples that would be better for you if you increased apples, or there's certain herbs that might be beneficial to you to help fill in those gaps to bring you back into balance. So it's just a different approach to health than what allopathy would be.
Well, what kind of techniques do you use to determine that?
So the question is, what type of techniques do I use to help determine what people might need? One technique would be reflexology. So I tend to use that as a tool to help people. I can find out what maybe organs are in distress while I'm working. Another is this book here. It's called The Ultimate Healing System. He teaches muscle testing, and that's where I did this course on muscle testing. And I do muscle testing. Everybody has a different technique on how they do it, but I do it where the person holds the item and then says, "I need this." And if they lean forward, we know they need it. If they lean back, then they don't. So they can hold a supplement, they can hold an herb, they can hold a food. I've told people, go to the grocery store and grab a candy bar and see, "I need this," and you'll probably fall over.
Yeah.
Right. So, but I do that at the supplement aisle sometimes because I know there's a tincture I might want to try. And I'm like, is it really what I need? And so I stand in the supplement aisle going, I'm sure I look silly, but I want to make sure that I'm actually getting what I need. Not just getting what somebody said this is good for, because a lot of times that's the part of natural health that gets a little weird is, like you hear about oils, the essential oils, and some people are like, there's an oil for that. There's an oil for that. There is an oil for a lot of things, but we want to make sure that we have the right application. Maybe oil isn't what you need for that situation. So each herb in its own preparation for its own thing is, and that's where an herbalist comes in, is we know like for mullein is a beautiful, wonderful herb. That is my favorite herb. And that's actually the name of my business is Moulin. And that's French for mullein. But
How do you spell them?
my mullein is, how do you spell that? Is Mullen.
M-U-L.
Yep. And it's a wild herb that you can find. It's usually the first herb that grows after the soil has been disturbed. So you'll see it in landscapes where they've excavated. And then the next spring, you'll see a lot of mullein. So,
Why do you use that?
so mullein is a wonderful plant. It's good for respiratory, for bladder control, strength. It actually tones the muscle at the base of the bladder. It's good for, and I've used this for a client. A client had a broken foot that she had broken when she was 8 years old. And she came to me at 28, so 20 years later, and the foot had never set correctly. And we wrapped it with a mullein leaf. And within 24 hours, the bone had reset correctly and she has no pain anymore. And I used it on her. And so then I started using it on other people. So I had hurt my knee. I'd fallen and hurt my knee. And for about 8 months, I took something, it was a homeopathic pellet called, it's burdock, but it's Symphytum officinale. But I took that homeopathic for about 8 months. And then after that, it was spring. So I started wrapping my knee with mullein. And in a year, my knee had healed and I had a torn meniscus. So it healed that up. We've used it on broken ribs. This is something from the herbalist Matthew Wood. He has a book and he had written about how he'd used mullein to reset bones that are hard to set. So if you jam your finger, jam your toe, break your ribs, it's a good resetting of the bone. So mullein's good for that. But what I was saying was you have to use it in the correct application. So it wouldn't be able to help you set a bone if you were taking it as a tincture. So when people say, "Oh, mullein's good for that," You just need to know how to use the mullein for that application. The same with oils, like peppermint. I have mint on here, but peppermint oil is wonderful in oil form. And that's one of my favorite ways to use peppermint is in oil form. You can put it in your drinks if you want. You can eat it right outside. That helps with indigestion. But the the mint oil is really good for headaches and, headaches, and like if you have a cold or a flu, you put it on the bottom of your feet and put a socks on. It helps to open the airways. My naturopath had me put it on the back of my hand and then lick it off, hold it in my mouth for just a little bit. Then you make an O with your mouth and you breathe in really, really deep and you breathe out your nose. And that kills all the bacteria that's in your sinus passages. And it just opens it all back up. So if you have bronchitis or a sinus infection, it's very effective to open that back up and clean it out. So yeah, lost my train. I chose three of my favorite. I don't say favorite. I love all the plants. So I chose 3 herbs that I thought would be good for this group because they're easy to be found in this area, whether you could grow them on your countertop like mint or grow them in a garden. But the other 2 you can find pretty much anywhere in the United States. Wherever you are in the backyard, you can find these 2. It's plantain and purslane. But plantain, like I said, was my first herb that I ever learned about. And I love it. I had little kids at the time, but if you get a mosquito bite or a bee sting, you take the plantain, you just chew a little bit and put it right on that bite, and it takes the itch away. It tends to pull the venom out because plantain has a drawing effect. It pulls the venom out, so it can pull the bee sting out. It can it pulls the sting out. I'm going to turn this off, so excuse me. And so in that application, it's easy. You go out in the yard, you find a bit of plantain, you can use it for that application, but it's also very nutritious. It's good in salads. I like the broadleaf plantain. There's also lance leaf plantain. So on the handout at the bottom, you can see the broadleaf is kind of like, looks like a spinach leaf. It's a little rounder. That one is less bitter, so it's a little more tasty in a salad. The lance leaf is more, it's more bitter. It's a little tougher. It's not as tender. So it's not as nice in a salad. You could put it in a smoothie if you wanted, but you're doing that for the nutrients that are in it. It's a very nutritive herb. So I like plantain a lot, and they're everywhere. So they're easy to find. They're great for wound healing. The thing about plantain is that it will heal a wound from the inside out. So if you have a deep cut, plantain is better to put on than calendula. So a lot of herbalists, we know that calendula is a great healing herb, but it seals. So if you have a deep cut, you don't want calendula because it could seal in infection. So you want the plantain because it'll draw out any infection, any debris, and it will start healing it from the base of the wound up to the surface. So plantain has been used for many years as a wound healer. It is very good at that because it has both actions of pulling or drawing and then healing the tissue. And it's a fun taste. And it's fun to send the kids out. Okay, my brother got a bee sting. They go running out into the yard to find a plantain for the bee sting. And if you use it, even if you don't have an allergy to bees, you use it, it reduces your risk then of becoming allergic to bees because you're pulling that venom out. Your body doesn't have to react and deal with it. So it would help keep you from having because we tend to build up a resistance to bee stings, and then we build up a reaction to bee stings. The other one that I have here was purslane. Purslane I find in my garden every year after I've planted. And it's really hard for me to have a garden because I don't like to pull the herbs. So my garden looks like a lot of weeds, but it's not weeds. They're all necessary. I have mullein in there and purslane and chickweed, and I'm out there only pulling grass. And so you go out there and it doesn't look very pretty, but yes.
There's a question about mullet. I did drink it for 2 weeks, got rid of bronchitis, but there's something in the leaf though that stings if you swallow it and goes down your throat.
Mhm.
So I didn't like that.
Right. Yeah. So she's saying that mullein has
It's like
it's the hairs. Yep. Those are irritating the tissue.
I feel like it's stinging.
And so actually, when I was saying that we put it on the foot, I cautioned my client that those hairs are actually irritating the tissue. So you could start to itch. It could get inflamed. I said, leave this thing on just as long as you can stand it. And when you get it off, maybe just make sure you wipe it really good, wash it really good. It'll go away. But that's the problem with tea for mullein tea. Mullein tea is very effective, but you do want to have a way to strain it. So if you can pour it through a coffee filter, that would capture all of those little hairs, most of those hairs. Yes.
What about if you use the coffee filter and then you put the mullein leaf on the skin?
Well, that's two different applications. So she's asking if we use the coffee filter for the mullein leaf on the skin. The mullein leaf on the skin is directly from the garden. I grab just a leaf. I don't cook it. I don't, heat it up. I want it as fresh as possible for that. But for tea, just pouring it through. Yep. Any other questions about mullein? Okay, back to purslane. There's a purslane grows in dry climates and in moist, so it'll start up when the early spring, when you have a lot of rain, and then it stays fresh and vibrant through the whole season, even after we get dry. But it's really, really good as a salad green. It's tasty. I like it. It has a bit of a salty taste to it. Purslane. The thing about purslane is it's mucilagenic. So when you eat it, it has a little bit of almost like a slimy to it. So I like to mix it with a lot of greens. I don't just eat it straight by itself because that can get a little annoying when you're eating. It's like trying to eat aloe, or drink aloe. I try to just take the shots of aloe. But it's good in that way because that's very helpful for all of your tissue. The mucilagenic action is soothing to your stomach. I mean, if you have indigestion, or if you have maybe stomach ulcers, or you have an irritable bowel syndrome, any stomach disruption or digestive disruption, the purslane can be very helpful in soothing that. It's a calming herb and very nutritive as well. There's a lot of vitamin A in it, and vitamin A we can get in a lot of our food. We don't tend to get enough of it. So this is one that's very high in vitamin A and helps to just boost that up. My favorite part about purslane is that it's a plant source for omega-3 fatty acids. So you don't have to get cod liver oil, which is, healthy, but I don't think that cod liver oil is a sustainable item. I feel that they don't process that well or source it well. It's damaging to the ecosystem to get cod liver oil. So if we can find something that is regenerative on its own and is very easy to grow, you'll find purslane anywhere. So if you need to increase your omega-3s, just in the summer, eat as many salads as you can with purslane in it. The thing about this kind of purslane that I find is it does grab a lot of dirt. And it's gonna be gritty. Like rinse it, clean it, do as best you can, but it's gonna be a little gritty. If you cultivate it yourself in a pot, you can buy varieties at the store, at the nurseries. They have those, and those are just as edible. I don't consider them as nutritive. They're always a little less. You just don't. They're a little less tasty. So I think it was Phil that left.
Oh, Phil went to the restroom. Oh.
Um,
I just am cautious of someone being in the church because we're responsible. Yeah, I am kind of scared. Okay.
Okay, that's okay. So that you can get cultivated varieties, they would be less gritty because you can grow them in your own pots, and they tend to grow a little more straight. They don't lay across the ground, but they're not as nutritive. So but it's whatever works best for you. If you have a container garden, you may not have access to purslane in a garden. That get some purslane and just use it as your salad greens, you know, grow some lettuces and purslane. Any questions on purslane? Oh, let me make sure I do say this. So there's something called spurge. Spurge grows right next to purslane. Most every time you find a purslane plant, you will find a spurge plant. They like to be next to each other, and spurge is toxic. So you need to know your herb. That's the biggest thing. There's this lady I follow on TikTok. Her name is the Black Forager, and she always says at the end of her videos, "Don't die." And I love how she says that, because we as foragers and herbalists, we need to know for sure what we're picking before we use it. Because spurge, actually, when you look at them side by side, you'll notice a difference. But when you're out there picking, they both have the red stem. But the purslane is a succulent, so the leaves are thicker, where spurge is a very thin leaf. It's kind of like a clover leaf in consistency, like how it's shaped. It's like a clover leaf. They don't look like clover. They look like the purslane. They have these little clusters and these little branches, and they grow along the ground, and they grow from a rosette, where that means the center, and it grows out of the center, like a dandelion grows out of the center, or mullein grows out of the center. And they grow along the ground. So be very careful when you're picking to make sure you are identifying each one, because as you go and you fill a basket, you may grab one and not. If you're not being intentional, throw it in, and you just got to be really careful. If you ingest it, I haven't actually checked into that. I don't know what would happen if you ingested spurge. I know it's toxic. I've heard of people getting upset stomach, but I assume it's going to be possibly more than that. It depends on how much you would eat, but yeah.
And like she said, if you get you'll definitely know the difference. Do you know a jade plant? How fat those leaves are? It's like a jade plant leaf. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like a succulent.
It is a, yep.
Yeah.
J-A-D-T.
Well, that's not gonna help you, but if you don't know it right now, it won't help you, but it's fat.
Yeah.
If the leaf is flat, that's not the right one. You
It's
want a
actually
fat
not
leaf.
a wild plant. It's just a domestic.
Yeah, jade is like a tropical. Yeah, that was just to use as an example. They're fat like a jade plant leaf is, so.
You could go to the nursery in the spring, like Vanadas. They have a lot of different variety of plants, or Horrocks has a lot of plants, and you could just ask what for a purslane. Just show me what a purslane looks like. They're pretty close. They don't look exactly like the wild ones, but you would be able to see the leaf and know how thick the leaf is compared to, like, a clover leaf is just flat with a little vein on it. It's just a very flat leaf. You'll be able to tell the difference from a spurge and a purslane.
So purslane, buy?
You can buy the plant of purslane, yes.
They put it in the garden?
Mm-hmm. You can put them in your garden.
Now,
Yeah.
when you put it in the garden, for like the spurge would grow next to it.
I don't know if you have a cultivated variety, if a spurge would show up. I don't know how they show up together, but that's a lot in nature. We see if you have poison ivy growing, most likely you're going to see jewelweed growing nearby. And jewelweed is the antidote to poison ivy. So you just yeah. So yeah, I don't know if the spurge would show up if you had a cultivated. Mhm.
In the spring, we'll take a walk around here and see if we see any of these
Poison
plants.
Mhm.
It will usually be growing where.
I did mean to bring you guys a salad dressing recipe that was for chickweed, but I forgot it. I apologize. I can maybe send it to, the recipe. So I had meant to bring a recipe for a salad dressing that was with chickweed. Chickweed is early spring. It's a nice, sweet herb in the early spring. It's really good for your eyes. And the salad dressing that I made is almost like a pesto. You can eat it with bread. I put it as salad dressing, but it's like a pesto. And it's delicious. It's just very healthy for you. I believe it has vitamin A. I don't remember off the top of my head, but I know that it's used for eye health. Chickweed. Mm-hmm. They're usually just a little ground cover that starts the first ones that I see in the spring. They're green first, and they have
those little tiny
white flowers. Yes, yeah, yeah, and they're just sweet. I love them. Again, I love all the plants, so I go all season and look for the different things. I actually have already seen chickweed this year, which is to me a little disheartening. It's too early. So that means by time that you have a full amount of chickweed, it's probably going to be bitter, maybe a little tough. So if you see chickweed now, you go ahead and get it, but it's not going to have full nutrition value right now because it's been dormant. So it's just the season is not helpful to the herbs right now, the way this season has gone. I was saying to Barb on the way over, I was actually very disappointed with this winter. We haven't had enough long cold to really help the herbs come, and now we've had warmth, so things are budding already. And then if it gets cold again, it's going to kill them. And so it's not, to me, it's kind of damaging to my ability to forage this year. But for the herbs this year, it's going to be a little fun, a little challenging. So the last one is mint. And mint, like I'd said before, I use a lot of mint oil. What I've used mint for in the past is I used to get aura headaches where my vision would disappear. Like it would go to nothing. I'd have just a little pinhole on one side to be able to see. And I could put the peppermint oil at the back of my temples. Peppermint oil is very strong. So just a tiny little bit right at the back of my temples, and it would help calm that down. It's very calming.
What?
The headache. I was getting a real bad headache. And then my headaches many times start at the base of my skull. I would put peppermint oil back there, and it would help the headache go away. So the peppermint oil is good for headache. I've used peppermint oil, like I said, for like cold, for asthma. You put it on your chest. I don't use Vicks Vapor Rub for, so there's something you can buy at the health food store called Tea Tree Therapy. And it's just like a little Vicks bottle, but it has a white label, and it has tea tree, and it has mint in it. And it is still a rub that you can put on. I put that on my chest and the bottom of my feet to help if I had a cold or a respiratory issue. But I also use mint in a bind. I keep mint in my purse. If you start coughing at church, you just put a drip on your tongue. I really do like mint oil as an application of the herb. Mint is good for, indigestion more as a leaf. Like the mint oil, you're going to get it on your tongue. You're not going to get it down to your stomach, right? It's going to probably absorb in your mouth. So if you're dealing with indigestion, a leaf of mint is very good. And it's good in water. If you're going to do infused waters, watermelon and mint is a good combination. Cucumber, watermelon, and mint are good combinations for infused water. They're cooling. Those are great in the summer. And watermelon, cucumber, and mint. And you can mix up your waters. Strawberry is always good too. So, but mint is a great one to learn about. I would encourage you to just type in mint. I tend to use spearmint on my tongue if I'm coughing at church, but peppermint if I'm trying to clear my sinuses and clear everything, because peppermint is very strong. Spearmint is a lot milder, and you're not going to have a spasm if you're already coughing at church. You don't necessarily want to put some peppermint. But I encourage you to look up mint. It's just a fun introductory herb to really learn about what they do and the actions of that are inside these plants, what they help with. The mint is good for the bees in the spring because it has flowers early. So I like having my mint growing outside. And
But it
Yes,
can be invasive, so you need to put it in a pot, right?
so yeah, she was saying it can be invasive.
Yeah.
Bed that
It's
has
borders.
Yeah. but
borders on it.
Yeah.
what did you say about the mint in spring?
It has flowers, so it's good for the bees. It's helpful to have as many plants as we can that can help the bees in the spring.
Yeah.
So, we have the dandelion, I forgot, I was just reading an article about the first flowers. Yeah, dandelions are one of the first flowers in the spring, and just don't go out and spray for dandelion. Let them go, they're fine. Yes, ma'am.
Peppermint is very prolific, like it really if it starts growing, it never stops.
Right. So you want to make sure when you're growing peppermint, you want it to be there because it's going to stay and it's going to take over. So what I did is my septic tank cover is a frame with dirt in it, and I planted my peppermint in that so that it won't get anywhere. It's going to stay in that frame.
You know, the same thing with the oregano, like benzo,
Yeah.
Oregano does that too. Okay.
And chamomile.
Chamomile. Oh yes. Yeah, chamomile likes to take over, and calendula does too. I planted calendula, and I was surprised how fast it took over the bed that I put it in. But that's beautiful. I like that one, so that's okay. So, any other questions about those? Calendula? Oh, I'm not good at spelling, so maybe someone.
C-A, oh, you got it, Jean? Yeah.
That one is really, really good for skin health. You can make, it's really good for skin health. Calendula can be made into salves for face. A lot of people use it on scars. Yeah, on scars. It's just really good for skin. I know that. We use it for that. And then it's good for small scrapes. Like I said before, you don't want to seal a deep wound, but calendula can be used for small scrapes, like maybe a cat scratch or something, and you wash it first. But make sure you wash it. For calendula, you actually have to infuse the flowers in oil, and then you can make a salve with it. So it's a process. It's a bit of a process. The flowers in an oil, and you infuse it into the oil, and then use that for a salve. So beeswax usually is part of that, and the oil that you have.
Now, what kind of oil?
You can use. I tend to use olive oil because it's readily available. Sunflower oil is good. Coconut is a little unstable for long periods, but I do tend to use it a little bit, but sunflower oil is very stable. And that one absorbs well. You want to find an oil that's going to absorb so you don't leave a greasy residue on your skin. Castor oil, sometimes I haven't used it as an infusing oil. I've used it as the carrier. Like I put the sunflower oil that's been infused with calendula and the castor oil together to try to give me some more working oil, and then I put with the beeswax.
Now would you the oil?
There's different methods for doing oil infusion. I'm not versed in all of them. There's some where you take and you heat it, very low heat. There's some where you set it in the sun, like mullein flowers. Those are for earaches, mullein flower oil. You would take all those little flowers and put them in the oil and then set them in the sun for, I think it's a couple hours, but it might actually be a couple days. I don't remember at the moment. I still have a jar of flowers that I haven't emptied. And then yes, you just put a couple drips in your ear for an earache. Mullein flowers are really good for ear infections, earaches. And for that, I also add garlic. So I would make the oil with the mullein flower, and then once it's strained, I put it in a little pot and put a clove of garlic, turn it on the lowest heat possible, and just let it kind of infuse with the garlic until it starts to smell like garlic. And then you put that in a dropper bottle, and you can use that in the ears. It helps with pain, and it helps with the infection. Yeah. It's hard to get mullein flowers because the bugs love them. And so you have to get out there every morning and try and pick a couple, get them in a jar and get them away. Because they end up with a lot of droppings on them. They're not very useful then. So, and you have to find a good stand of mullein because you don't want to take all the flowers from one plant. You want the plant to be able to go to seed so that it can continue with more mullein next year. And in future years, actually, those seeds can last many years before they sprout. So they can be up to 10 years. I've heard there was a plant where a seed was 10 years old and they planted it and it sprouted. I don't know how old seeds can be from mullein, but they're very viable for a long time. But yeah, I don't like to take, you don't want to take, when you're out foraging, just be very responsible foragers. Don't take everything. I've seen a lot of people going and doing elderberry lately, and they go out into public land and they take all the elderberry for their syrups and stuff, and you can't do that. You take a little from each plant. If you don't have enough for yourself, leave it out there because that's birds. That's the food for the birds. That's the bees use the flowers. That once it's to fruit, you don't have to worry about the bees then, but the birds need it, and we need to let it go to seed so that it can continue to propagate new plants. We don't want to take it all. That's what happened with echinacea. Echinacea was in the wild, and people learned about how good it was, and then they all went out into the wild and they took it all, and it's basically gone from the landscape now. So you don't see a lot of wild echinacea anymore. So I try to plant echinacea and let it go. Like, go out into the woods.
Where is that coming
It's good for immune system health. It's very good if you start to get a cold, you would take it at the beginning of a cold to help reduce the time that you're sick. It kicks it out a little quicker, helps your body get over it faster. But I'm sorry?
Do you put it in oil?
Echinacea, how do you use it? It's usually in tea. Usually it's a dried flower, dried leaf, in tea. I have seen echinacea in powdered and then in capsules, and that's pretty good sized dose to help if you're really trying to kick a cold at the beginning. But I only take it for a couple of days at the beginning of a cold, and don't keep taking it because your body can develop a resistance to it, and then it wouldn't be as effective. So, yeah. I brought a book. This is my favorite farm. It's called Backyard Pharmacy, but it's my favorite herb book. It was written by a lady named Rachel Weaver. You can find it on online, like Abe Books or Thrift Books. They have copies of it. Yep. It's called Backyard Pharmacy. This author wrote, I think, 3 or 4 books. She has one called Be Your Own Doctor. And so that she has 4, I think, books. They all have
What's your name again?
her name is Rachel Weaver. And what I love about this book, the reason I love this book is this is our region where we are. So all the herbs in here are things we are going to find. So that's part of when you're looking at herb books. Sometimes you find some that are from out west, and it's the different types of herbs that grow there, and that's okay. But this is going to be stuff we'll find here. And then she has recipes. So I opened it to purslane, which we have, but she has recipes on how she's used it. She says it's a healthy addition to the diet, which is what I was saying. It tells you what it's used for. Eye wash. You can use it as an eye wash. It's actually been used to help with depression. With people.
What is good for the eye?
This purslane
Purslane?
is
The
good
one
for eye
We
wash.
have the handout for.
And then in this book, she tells you how to use it. So many herb books will say this herb is good for this thing, but it does not tell you how to use it.
Oh.
And so she has recipes. She has, like in here, she says for eye wash, squeeze and bruise the tender plant and use the juice to wash sore or inflamed eyes. Like she tells you how to use it. So it's from the fresh and then it's used. So this I think is a great resource because it's not just saying this herb is used for this, which is what you hear a lot. You know, people say lavender's used for fever. Well, how do you use lavender to help with a fever? Is it an oil? Do you eat the leaf? You know, so it's important to know how we use our herbs. I've actually never used lavender for a fever because I do my best to just let the body run the fever.
Yeah.
I don't try to reduce the fever unless the person is absolutely miserable and we need to help with some symptoms so that they can keep fighting with the other symptoms,
I
you know.
would think peppermint would be better than lavender.
Yeah, I don't know. Peppermint, that's what I tend to
Yeah,
use, and most of the time the fevers are.
So, yeah.
I tend sometimes to make sure, you know, a lot of the times people will recommend like ginger when you have a cold or a flu, and I'll say, wait, do they have a fever? Because ginger increases your body temperature. And so you want to make sure that you know your herb and what it does before you just throw it at somebody with symptoms. What are their symptoms? What are your own symptoms? Know yourself, know what's going on. I can, yeah. Okay. So anyway, I recommend this book. And I did bring another book about healing herbal teas if you guys wanted to thumb through and just see if there's any interesting recipes in there. And that one I like because it explains what the teas are typically for. Like, why would we take this tea? What is this tea good for? Yeah. Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. So there's a request for me to talk about reflexology. So I've been practicing reflexology as a practitioner now since 2019. But I learned it from my grandpa when I was younger. I remember if I would say I had a headache, he would always say, give me your toe. And he would start massaging my toe. And he wasn't very gentle about it. So it was painful. But so I learned from him about what reflexology was, where it's the understanding that the nerves flow through our bodies, right, from our brain through and then back, and that there's a map actually in the palm of our hands, the bottom of our feet, and even on our ears. I don't practice anything on the ears, but that this map is associated with other parts of our body. So, you know, your thumb is your head, you know, and so when I'm working on someone and I feel that the center of their toe, the toe or the thumb is the same. If I feel, you know, I had someone that had a really deep divot in the center of their thumb, I said, are you struggling to get to sleep at night? And they said, yeah. So that is where the pineal is, and the pineal is what releases melatonin. And if that isn't working well, I can feel that in your toe or your thumb. And I can say, well, okay, what do we need to do to help you with your pineal? And so I always encourage people to get their supplements from their diet. I do not recommend anybody take melatonin. That is my recommendation. Don't take melatonin unless you're at last resort and you cannot get your pineal to work, then you may need to take melatonin, but it is a last resort. What you should do is increase your tryptophan rich foods. So your body takes tryptophan and converts it into melatonin. So tryptophan rich foods would be eggs, avocados. They have a lot of tryptophan. Chicken, people talk about turkey, you know, they say that turkey tryptophan nap or whatever. But yeah, eggs are good. I always recommend just increasing your tryptophan rich foods to help your pineal to be able to develop the melatonin, the way God designed your body to do what it's supposed to do. Let it do its job. If you supplement with the melatonin, which is the end result, then you're telling the pineal it doesn't need to work. And you want your organs to, your glands to work. So, but yeah, with the reflexology, we know I can find things. So that's why I said earlier, I tend to use it just to help the person I'm working on, because, you know, they like a foot rub or a hand rub, right? Did you liked yours? And that's stress relieving. It's actually pain relieving. There was a few studies that have been out. One was at MSU on women who were going through cancer treatments. And they found that it did help women who are dealing with cancer treatments to reduce their pain and the stress in their body. And so it does help with that. but I also can use it at the same time to just check what's going on in your body. How are your lungs? This year, I saw a lot of inflammation on the lungs. And we had that terrible air quality this summer. And so a lot of people who never had lung issues before, we struggled with that air quality, and there was a lot of inflammation on lungs. So then I just am able to use these tools to say, hey, you know, there's something going on with your thyroid. Are you getting that checked? Make sure you check with your doctor on your levels for your thyroid, because I feel a pebble. I call them pebbles. You feel a little knot under the skin. And as I work, it tends to go away. But if it's chronic, sometimes it's a bigger knot, you know, and if I see sometimes, like I said, a hollow spot, it tells me that that organ's not really functioning at full capacity.
It's a wonderful tool to help you diagnose,
Mm-hmm.
or start down the path of solutions.
Correct,
With
for
herbs.
solutions. Yes, yes, yeah, yeah. So I tend to use it more from the natural side, where I let the client know what I'm noticing, and then I'll give some recommendations, but I also encourage them to do a session where I would do muscle testing to get a better direction of what really would help you most. Should we check into some herbs for you? Should we look at some changes to your diet or your exercise, or your, maybe we need to talk about stress, you know? Maybe reflexology actually is the thing that you need for a while to help relieve the stress in your body. So
So Kelly, once you do that, are you also available with the herbs for remedies for the client?
so
Do
the
you
question,
help them obtain those and prepare them and show them how to dose?
so the question is, do I have herbs to share? I can't sell anything. So I may have some herbs that I have already tinctured or infused in oils, or I may have some dried herbs that I might gift to someone to get them started. I may go out and walk with them in the yard and say, hey, let's look at, so that you can go find it yourself. I may point them in the right direction to various herbal companies. A really good herb company is Mountain Rose Herbs. Mountain Rose is wonderful. It's good to know where you're getting your herbs from. Yeah.
Because they can sit in a warehouse for
Mm-hmm.
a long time in high heat and
Yeah.
they're no good.
Right. I had so pine needle, white pine needle is really good to when if you've been exposed to a certain recent virus that's been going around since 2020.
And all of its variations.
In all of its variations. There was some studies that were done that found that white pine needle has a component in it that inhibits the development of the spike protein. And so if you take white pine needle tea at the beginning, you can probably reduce the damage to your cells, which could shorten the duration of the illness for you. I also used it for anyone who decided to take the preventative measure. I try to be very careful how
Yes, exactly.
take the preventative measure. If there was someone that I knew that was going to lose their job if they didn't.
Yeah.
And so they had to, and so we used the white pine needle to help reduce their symptoms that they had afterwards, and in hopes that it wouldn't damage their cells, that the preventative wouldn't damage their cells. We don't know how effective it is, but I do know that the people have been less ill when I've used white pine needles. So what I brought that up for is you could go online and buy white pine needles, but they're going to not be green. They'll come and they'll be brown, because once white pine dries, it's going to be brown or gold in color. So you can find white pines in Michigan. They're pretty prolific. And I had a huge branch come down on my house this winter, you know, at the ice storm. So I just go out and you cut them and you put them in the freezer, and I have those for tea. So my daughter was exposed recently, and we just made, white pine is a hardier herb. It's thicker and dry. So you have to simmer it. So sometimes you can steep a tea. Sometimes you have to actually simmer it a little bit. So we put a lid on it on a saucepan and we simmered it for about 10 minutes and then let it cool and then she could drink that.
How much should you put?
I did a saucepan of probably a cup and a half of water, maybe 2 cups of water with about a quarter cup of needles. Yeah, needles, and put them in something, maybe some cheesecloth or something. It's really hard to drink when the little needles are getting in everywhere. So I have a little tea infusing little stainless steel cup with a lid that I set in the pan and let it simmer so that the needles weren't all over in the pan. Or you can filter it out with a coffee filter again, if you just simmer it and then pour it through a coffee filter. So, and again, we got off the topic of reflexology and it's good. Yes, it's all connected. Yeah. I have business cards. Yep, I have some. I'll grab one for you.
Any other questions for Kelly? Okay. Are you ready?
Thank you.
Kelly.
Sign this off. Thank you, Kelly. I'll supply her information in the email with the replay, so